Welcome to Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we discuss Trump 2.0's policies and politics and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. What's happening with Hong Kong? Once Asia's vibrant financial hub and the place where East meets West. The images of 2019 street protests still linger, and the imposition of the national security law has reshaped the city, at least in part. But how exactly has it changed? Could the recent IPO boom signal a revival? Or are we looking at a different Hong Kong? To gain a deeper perspective, I spoke with Wang Xiangwei, former editor-in-chief of the South China Morning Post, about how the city has transformed, set against the backdrop of changes within the paper itself over the last 3 decades. As Hong Kong's leading English newspaper and an influential voice in Asia, SCMP's coverage of China reflects not only Hong Kong's evolving identity, but also its shifting relationship with the mainland. Let's dive deeper. Welcome, Wang Xiangwei. It's such a pleasure to welcome you to Perspectives with Wenchi Yu. I've been reading your writing over the years. Maybe we can start with just your personal story. I know you've been veteran journalist for a long time. So how did you get involved in journalism?
Thank you, Wenchi, for having me. It's my pleasure and honor. I took interest in journalism when I was in college. You know, I was born in the northeastern part of China, Jilin City, Jilin Province. Jilin is one of the 3 provinces in the northeastern part of China. The People's Republic of China was founded in 1949. In the first 20, 30 years, that was where many of China's heavy industries were built and developed. And then it's just like the Rust Belt states in the United States. The economy took a heavy hit. The reason I'm telling you this is that the northeastern part of China, because we were very close to Soviet Union. So at the time when China and the Soviet Union were on good terms, that Russian, the language of Russian, was much during that area.
Did you see a lot of Russians?
By the time I grew up, China broke up with the Soviet Union. You know, bro romance was over. So I was, when I was sort of growing up, China started to open up to the outside world. So what happened was, my English teacher was originally a Russian language instructor. As China was opening up, so most of the Russian language instructors were retrained to learn English, to teach English. At that time, I was in a very ordinary school, and then in my class about 50 students, and I was probably the only one who paid any attention to what my English teacher said. So she really
took an interest in you.
So she started to give me private tutoring lessons. So I took an interest in English. You know, at that time, China's families were poor. In our family, our most prized possession was a shortwave transistor radio. So one day, I turned on the transistor radio and I just came across this English language teaching program, which totally changed my life.
What was that?
The English 900. Broadcast by the Voice of America.
Wow.
Heard this very sweet Beijing accent hostess. Her name in Mandarin is called He Lida. She was originally born in Beijing and immigrated to the United States and joined VOA. At the initial stage of China's opening up, there were 2 English language programs which influenced at least 2 generations, including my generation. One is the English language teaching program produced by BBC. It's called Follow Me, 跟我学. And this program was broadcast on China's central television. And then the other program, which has influenced at least 2 generations of people who were born in the 50s and 60s, 70s, when we want to know about the outside world. This is the program, English 900. And it also has a connection with Taiwan. This English 900 was originally created by Americans to teach English in Taiwan. And then one of the editors got hold of this English language teaching material. And the guy worked for the VOA. And then he went to the English language teaching department saying that, we need to repackage this and teach English to the mainland audience, the Chinese audience. So it's called 英语就
Are we talking about the 70s right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I'm mentioning this is that this is the first time I heard, real English from the U.S. Little did I know at that time, China in the 50s, 60s, 70s, until 80s, that listening to VOA was a crime. It's called listening to the enemy radio. People could be jailed for this. The kind of thing I did, listening to the enemy radio, was the equivalent of a new crime in China, where if you use VPN to access foreign news sites, that's also a crime now.
Except that how many people are doing it?
There were a lot. I enrolled as an English major at the Beijing Foreign Studies University. At that time, it's called the Beijing Institute of Foreign Languages. And this is China's top institute to train language students for foreign ministry and for the various ministries in terms of international affairs. Most of my classmates went to the library to read the American or the British classics. Our university was given special permission to subscribe to all the latest news magazines, including The Time, Newsweek, The Economist, Business Week, and others. So every day, if there was no class, I'll go to the library and read The Economist and Time and Newsweek.
When you were reading those magazines in the 80s, what did you like about reading them?
I was an avid reader, so I'll read anything. Language students, we are supposed to learn English. The Time and Newsweek, particularly The Economist, all those writers write very concise, beautiful stories. By reading those news magazines, I also started to take a keen interest in the news. After 4 years, I went to study journalism at the the journalism department of Graduate School of Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. At that time, China was opening up. So we had a professor. I still remember his name. His name is Kenneth Stark. He used to be the Dean of Journalism at the University of Iowa. So he taught us American journalism, and then upon graduation, I went to work for China Daily. In 1991, I got a scholarship to study a international journalism degree at the Cardiff University. So I went to England. That was my first time in England. After I finished that degree in 92, soon after, Deng Xiaoping had this famous Southern tour. Chinese economy was booming. I managed to have the internship opportunities at the Guardian, the Financial Times, the Economist, and the Economist Intelligence Unit. And later on, I landed a temporary job with the BBC World Service, Chinese service. When I worked for the Economist as an intern, I managed to write 2 stories, even though they did not have the byline, but I had the clippings. I had 1 story published on the Guardian.
And what were the stories?
The first story I wrote for the Economist magazine is China was opening up aviation. So the China started to break up the CAAC, the China National Aviation Company, sort of started to set up various airlines, and they started to buy foreign airplanes. And the other 2 stories, one for Guardian and one for the Economist, is about China's efforts to promote equity markets. At that time, China started to develop stock markets. In 1993, I came to Hong Kong. I first worked for a Chinese language magazine, news magazine called 亚洲周刊. That's the Chinese version of Asia Week, originally set up by the Time Warner Group, by the Time magazine. In June 96, I joined SCMP as the China business reporter. In the year 2000, they made me the China editor, responsible for China coverage. And in the year 2012, my previous boss, previous owner of SCMP, he made me the editor-in-chief. At the beginning of 2016, Alibaba was in negotiation to buy SCMP. At that time, my wife and daughter live in Beijing, and I really want to get back to spend more time with them. Right? So I voluntarily left. After Ali bought SCMP, they decided to retain me as the editorial advisor. The point I want to tell you is that from the year 2000 to October 2022, I led the expansion of China coverage of the South China Morning Post. The South China Morning Post is one of the oldest English language newspapers published in Asia. SCMP was founded in 1903. And for many, many years over the past...
Founded by the Brits?
It's founded by the Brits. And then around the time I came to Hong Kong in 1992 or 1993, Murdoch sold SCMP to Robert Kwok. And then Kwok sold the SCMP to Alibaba at the beginning of 2016. Because of Hong Kong's proximity to the Chinese mainland, SCMP has always been a indispensable source for outside to know more about China. When I took over the SCMP was basically a print operation. So I knew for a fact that we had to go digital. In 2012, only 10% of our online readers are from outside Hong Kong. Most of our online readers were SCMP print subscribers, about 90%. Today, it's the other way around. 10% from Hong Kong and over 90% from outside Hong Kong. About 30% of our online traffic from the United States.
Including myself, of course.
Yeah, the rising tensions between China and the US. And then the rest of the sources of traffic all from the Five Eyes, the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and then followed by the English-speaking countries in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Singapore.
When you joined SCMP in the 90s until the 2000s, how you cover China, the perspectives the stories that you were writing, how have they evolved, right? Because right now people look at SCMP, it's a very different publication.
If you look at the history of SCMP and even the history of journalism in Hong Kong, I am the first mainland Chinese to lead a newsroom of a mainstream English language newspaper in Asia or in Hong Kong. When I joined in 1996, almost all of the top management were Brits. The SCMP was founded by Brits, and over the 100 years that it was basically operated along the lines of a Fleet Street newspaper. And
it was created for the Brits to read, right?
Yeah. Before 1997, soon after I joined, veterans told me the story that SCMP was basically a mouthpiece for the colonial government. Because at that time, the colonial government senior staff were all Brits. Most of them, they didn't speak Cantonese. But then again, SCMP is so important because Hong Kong's elites at that time were all educated in UK. So they all have developed the habit of reading English language newspapers. The people in the colonial government, if they want to roll out the policy, and they will give SCMP the exclusive to test the waters to get reactions. In terms of China's coverage, at that time, most of the reporters who work for SCMP, who write on China, is all foreigners. They're based in Beijing. When I began as China editor, I remember that our reporters, the sub-editors, all read the wires, the news agencies, Reuters, AFP, AP. And then so when the story broke sort of about China, they all look at the wires agencies first. before I took over as China editor, the kind of stories SCMP ran is basically like the kind of stories the Guardian, the Reuters and AP, this their way of looking at China.
It's foreigners looking at China.
It's like a foreigners looking
Yes.
at China. So after I took over, I made it my mission to do what I want SCMP's China coverage to become. As I mentioned earlier, we want to be the insider. We want to report and write about China in a sense to give people a much fuller picture. Before I took over, around that time, the China coverage of SCMP and the other newspapers, the English language newspapers in the West about China, focus on 4 T's: trade, Tibet, Tiananmen, 4T, Taiwan.
Tough issues.
So I started to expand our coverage, both width and depth.
The owner at that time, or the leadership in the newspaper, decision to hire you, 86, and then later on in 97 is when Hong Kong went back to China. Do you think it's tied to that decision? The Chinese ownership of Hong Kong is time to give agency back to China, Hong Kong a little bit. Do you think it's tied to that? And then second, did you know when you were hired, you're already on this mission to tell a different kind of story? Or was it something that's developed later?
I'll guess that, at that time there was, they were thinking that, for SCMP to become the go-to source of information on China, you have to present, right, a much fuller picture, not only about politics, about people, about society, about China's Go West policy, about China. You have to go deep, you have to dive. At that time, I think I did a very good job on China business coverage. So they decided to give me a chance to try to expand. I also happen to agree that the China at that time was portrayed in the Western media, including SCMP, was only one part of China. Before 1997, SCMP was considered a British newspaper. In Beijing, was under control of the foreign ministry. So the SCMP was not allowed to hire Hong Kongers or the Chinese to work as reporters. So after 1997, from Beijing's perspective, they changed SCMP's minder from foreign ministry to the Hong Kong Macau Affairs Office. So we were also allowed to hire Hong Kong people to be our correspondents.
But what about mainland Chinese? Could you hire?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that question. In fact, after I took over as China editor, I started to hire more mainland Chinese to be our reporters. But unfortunately, until today, the Chinese government does not allow Chinese passport holders to become fully accredited reporters. There's not much you can do about it.
So SCMP is still viewed differently, right? It's definitely not wholly Chinese, that mainland Chinese in that sense.
Yeah, it's a good question. That the SCMP, as I have said earlier, we are based in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
We are part of China, but Hong Kong is a separate jurisdiction. And then, so because of that, the SCMP can produce independent, insightful stories about China and China's politics. And we can talk about this press freedom thing later, but I think even today, if you read SCMP, you can still read critical stories about China, which you cannot do that in the Chinese media.
Your Chinese media outlets.
Yeah, and then
let's just say the good days of China opening up until let's say the mid 2015, or let's say, or just say the 15 years or so around that time. How would you say SCMP's coverage of China differ from your typical Reuters, AP, or any foreign media? How does it incorporate a Hong Kong perspective? What is the differentiator of CMP's China story?
It's an excellent question which we talk about, is that because Hong Kong is already part of China, so we need to take advantage of that to become an insider on China. So when we look at China, there has to be a combination in a way that our readers, our readers are Hong Kong people and the people in the West who want to know more about China. We have to let them understand what is happening. So that's the kind of inside information. And then I was reminding our colleagues all the time, we are not part of China's massive propaganda apparatus. Because we are Hong Kong based and we abide Hong Kong laws. Even today, the SCMP's website is banned by the Chinese government.
So this is for listeners. So if you are based in Beijing, for example, without using a VPN, you couldn't get on SCMP's website.
No, you can't. No, you can't.
Yeah.
That made that has made SCMP. We always want to provide that perspective. That is a Chinese perspective on things, but not the perspective of the Chinese government.
Yes.
That's the key difference. I think certain people, you have to understand, I get pressure from both sides. Certain people, not all of people, we have great readers. I have lots of followers. Certain people in Hong Kong and outside will say, oh, SCMP went soft on China. And then we also get SCMP website banned in China. We also get our reporters harassed, our correspondents in China harassed. We also got pressure from China saying that we are so critical of China. And then I said to myself, in that case, I want our paper to be independent, to be insightful. I cannot please everyone. So in the end, I told myself, just follow my own conscience as a journalist. Just do what needs to be done. Chasing a news lead, backing up a good story with credible sources.
Right before Alibaba took over, Hong Kong was already experiencing some protester movement, but it wasn't 2018-19 yet. So what were some of the hardest or biggest pressures you were facing at that time? Like, what were the forces that you were fighting against? Because the ownership hasn't changed and the political situation hadn't changed entirely. So what were the pressures then?
The biggest challenge for me as a journalist, I was trained well. The biggest worry I have every day is that not knowing things which are happening, getting the scoop and not to get that story. There was a time the New York Times had a excellent scoop on Premier Wen Jiabao's family finances. They broke that story is excellent. It's an excellent example of thorough investigative reporting efforts. Some friends jokingly said to me, if you had that story, would you dare to print it? I said, why not? If I had that, first of all, you have to remember, the New York Times correspondents who work on those stories, they have done an excellent job by digging up all the dirt. In the end, we managed to have a small scoop, which is that at that time, Premier Wen Jiabao was so upset. So he wanted to issue a statement. So eventually, they chose SCMP. So I managed to run past 22 years when I was a senior editor with the SCMP. Certain people will always suspiciously look at my mainland background. I'm just a journalist, just doing my job. I have no hidden agenda. If you look at what we have done over the past 22 years when I was in charge, we have broken lots of good stories and we have ran stories which really made certain people in China very angry. But, it's a good story. Sometimes I have to deal with the stakeholders, right? Chinese officials, Hong Kong officials, the officials from US consulates and other consulates, and this is my job. One of our reporters managed to get an exclusive interview with Dalai Lama. We ran that story on the front page. At that time, national security law, it is it is okay, it is legal, right by Dalai Lama. I'm not quite sure you can do it today.
I know. So we have to talk about, do you think the change of ownership changed the newspaper in any way? Because I still remember a lot of people started to say, oh, because it's owned by Alibaba now, it's Jack Ma who's Chinese, the newspaper has changed. From your point of view, is that a fair assessment?
I don't agree with that assessment at all, because after Alibaba took over, they made me the editorial advisor based in Beijing, advising SCMP's China coverage. What I could tell you is that I did not get any phone call from anybody from Alibaba on our China coverage. Some of our stories are pretty controversial. The point I want to make that as soon as I made the China editor in the year 2000, the similar things also said about me. And then, I find out the people who said negative things about SCMP, most of them did not even read SCMP. They did not read the stories. They just heard somebody saying online and then they just want to say it. I don't agree with that assessment. You have to read the newspaper and make the judgment yourself every day. And I still believe they're trying to do a good job in very, very difficult circumstances. Now with this national security law and now with this rising, fast-changing geopolitical environment.
Let's talk about it, right? True changes, in my view, is the national security law, introduction of that. And you can't say that Hong Kong has not changed. Oh, and we don't. I don't need you to comment on how Hong Kong has changed or not, but specifically as a veteran SCMP senior editor and now looking at its coverage, tell us what has changed. Not in a way how Western media says what SCMP has changed, but from your point of view, there have been changes. But what are these changes in your own words that you feel most accurately characterize the changes, whether it's justified, legitimate, fair, or not?
Right now I'm just a regular reader. I think they are still trying to do a good job in a very difficult circumstances. I'm no longer involved into day-to-day editorial decision. But if you read SCMP front page, if you read their China coverage, they're still trying to go on to break the story. And then another point I want to make is, over the past 10 years, with our leader sort of consolidating power and sort of tightening control, it is also now difficult to get good stories about China's politics. I find it just right now is so difficult. Previously, in those days, you can get people to talk to you. Mm-hmm. And then there were also times when deliberately leaked because of the political developments in China, where you can get the story out. I think right now, with the discipline, with all the social media reports, the online influencers talking about China, now it's getting so difficult to ascertain, the authenticity of all those rumors swirling around on the internet.
As a reader myself, how I look at SCMP now and why I say it's even more important, because Western media, I read Chinese media as well because I read Chinese language. And then I also want to read SCMP because I kind of feel like it offers a very different perspective relatively to pure Western and then pure Chinese. And so then that's when I know where the lines are drawn. But it is interesting to see the changing editorial perspectives. I'm not saying right or wrong. To me, it's an interesting reflection of the changes in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, in a way, is owning up its Chinese identity even more.
As I have said earlier, sometimes you cannot get the news out is because it's so difficult to ascertain which is true, which is false, with so many rumors. You can read the Western media And tell me, when was the last time they broke a story about China's politics?
WSJ, or at least Ling Ling and those folks are still trying to play that role.
But their stories mainly focusing on the trade-related issues. You know, they did a very good job of scooping that story about Liu Jiechao being detained. The news really shocked me on a personal level because he and I,
I'm sure you knew each other for a
yeah,
long
we
time.
were
You came
classmates.
up from this similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not only for SCMP, it's for every media organization which is covering China. It just, the situation is just getting so difficult. And then the kind of pressure, you know, I'm no longer in the game, so I cannot tell you the kind of pressure they're getting. The same thing is, if you look at the United States, the kind of pressure a journalist who merely wants to do his or her job, the kind of pressure you get if you get the leader of the free world calling you fake news every other day. We don't have Hong Kong leader or Chinese leader calling the Hong Kong media fake news. Let's just talk about the elephant in the room, the national security law. So with Jimmy Lai on trial, there were lots of concerns about the application of the law, what it means for one country, two systems, whether Hong Kong is becoming a one country, one system. I'm still sort of cautiously optimistic. With, you know, I mean, there was nothing wrong for Hong Kong to have the national security law. I think that people are more concerned about how
Enforced. Yeah, how is it enforced?
Yeah, is enforced. So
Right.
here, I want to offer a perspective which I hope the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government will do, is this. The journey to the West is one of China's most famous, well-known, well-read classics, right? It's talking about a monk and his 3 disciples sort of embark this arduous journey to India to get the sacred Buddhist scriptures. Along the way, there were so many monsters in the way. So the monk will have to rely on the 3 disciples, and the most powerful one is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King.
Monkey King.
Yeah, the Monkey King by nature was rebellious. So what happened was that with the support of Guan Yin, the monk tricked Monkey King to wear a constricting golden headband. So that, you know, every time the Monkey King was in, was rebellious, did not listen to the monk, the monk, Tang Quanzhang, will recite a sutra, and then the headband would causing tremendous pain, so that the Monkey King will comply with the wish of the monk. In many ways, the national security law is like a constricting golden headband Beijing puts on Hong Kong. You have to understand the purpose. Like in the journey to the West, the reason the monk and Guan Yin put this constricting golden headband is not to restrain Monkey King's powers, is to control him. The Monkey King still have the 72 transformation magic powers, and in the end, Monkey King still comply and ensure the monk arrived in India and got what he wanted. I hope the Chinese government understands this. With the national security law, there is nothing we can do about it. It's a constricting headband now putting on the head of Hong Kong. Why they want to do it is because whether you agree with Beijing or not, from their perspective, Hong Kong went rogue.
From their perspective.
So they want, let me finish this, right? So they want to control Hong Kong. But the national security law is not meant to destroy Hong Kong's powers. I think I hope the Chinese leaders understand that. Using the analogy to the journey to the West, if you read this novel, which I read many times when I was young, the monk used this headband very sparingly to make sure that Monkey King complies, because that's a lethal weapon. If you use this frequently, it will be very detrimental to the health of
Right.
Hong Kong. And it will weaken Hong Kong's powers.
This is the first time I heard this kind of analogy. Thinking back, especially around 1819, what went wrong that made Beijing feel they had to put this ban?
There were lots of reasons which contributed to the decision that Beijing finally decided to impose national security law in such a drastic fashion. During the 2019 protests, the young protesters waving American flags and raising the sign, saying something to effect, please, Donald Trump, liberate Hong Kong, help us to liberate Hong Kong. From Chinese leaders' perspective, Hong Kong is already part of China. The 2019 protests showed that even though Hong Kong is part of China and Beijing and Washington openly battled for influence, from the leaders' point of view, they cannot tolerate.
We have to talk about the changing relationship between Hong Kong and Beijing. As someone who's been living in Hong Kong for 30 years,
On
and off 30 years, and as a very shrewd journalist, what is your view?
People's perception about Hong Kong, I mean, it's including the people in Hong Kong. Hong Kongers' perception about Hong Kong has changed, and so has the people who live outside Hong Kong, the Americans, the Brits, and including the mainlanders who live in the mainland China. I believe that Hong Kong, with the imposition of national security law and with the Jimmy Leung trial and with the reports that the Hong Kong government here has put up bounties on those people who live in the States and Australia and the UK in the name of national security. I think the general feeling for many people is that Hong Kong is becoming one country, one system.
Hong Kong is even secondary to Beijing. It's like one of the provinces.
Even though Hong Kong is a special administrative region, but Hong Kong is part of China since 1997.
It did enjoy some level of autonomy, right?
Yes, absolutely. Basic law stipulates, as basic law guarantees that Hong Kong has its different system. That's why it's called one country, two systems. Hong Kong, according to the basic law, is allowed to continue its capitalist system for 50 years. The contract is supposed to end in 2047. And then within this one country, two system framework, the basic law stipulates that Hong Kong will continue to practice its own legal system. It's the common law system, which is totally different.
British,
it's a British system and it's totally different from the legal system adopted in the mainland China, which is the continental law like the United States. So I'm sure lots of people may not agree with me. This is my view. I believe that the fundamentals which have underpinned the success of Hong Kong over the past 100 years. Its capitalist system, rule of law, common law, government, efficiency, capitalist way of doing things have not changed. Politically, that's changed. The sort of fundamentals underpinning the success of Hong Kong have not changed that much. But the perception about Hong Kong has changed completely. Lots of people that Hong Kong is becoming another Chinese city. I share the concerns of lots of people in Hong Kong and outside Hong Kong about the future of Hong Kong because of the way the national security law is imposed and because the things, certain things the Hong Kong government has done. I think generally, because I have been studying and writing about China's politics over the past 30 years, certain people believe that the imposition of the national security law is the ultimate, is the smoking gun that Beijing wanted to turn Hong Kong into one country, one city all along. I don't really abide that. Hong Kong was returned to China in 1997. If Beijing wanted to turn Hong Kong into a one-country West system, Beijing should have done that a long time ago. And secondly, if you want to look at the history of Hong Kong, Hong Kong's links with China, I have written so many articles about this. If you look at the history of Hong Kong, you will find that Hong Kong has been valuable to the mainland China precisely because Hong Kong is different, is a capitalist city. And the third point I want to make is I share the concerns about the future of Hong Kong because certain things the Hong Kong government has done which has worsened the perception about Hong Kong being just becoming another Chinese city. But I don't think that's the intention of Beijing. I think China's top leaders have also repeatedly said over the past 5 years that it wants Hong Kong to continue as a capitalist city.
I want to talk about the perception issue because perception, in some way,
is reality.
Exactly. My own observation, and I wanted to hear from you, is the certain kind of perception may have been too strong and it doesn't reflect the reality. However, it has created changes in Hong Kong as well. So one can argue the fundamentals of Hong Kong haven't really changed. As you said, the capitalist system, the stock exchange is doing so well, the IPOs and all these things a lot of people are today discussing whether Hong Kong is coming back as a financial hub. But you have also said, I noted, the political side of things has changed. And so what exactly, from your point of view, in your words, the political side has changed? Because I do think it has had that ripple effect on how people think about Hong Kong. And secondly, clearly Beijing understands that political change will have some kind of impact on Hong Kong. However, they, for whatever reason, felt the need to implement that change. They are also thinking about the consequences and still keeping Hong Kong as a different system.
I want to give you another very interesting anecdote which shows the importance of Hong Kong being like a capitalist city and why Hong Kong status as a different city, as a capitalist city, can help China and can bridge that gap between the East and West. This is also something that I'm going to write about for my next column for SCMP. I live in the Wan Chai area, very close to the Hong Kong Convention Center, Hong Kong Exhibition and Convention Center, which is the largest exhibition center in Hong Kong, in downtown. So I passed the convention center front entrance almost every day. And on August 28th, I saw an advertising board on the main entrance which advertised Asia Adults Expo.
Adults Expo? Okay, what does that mean?
It's 亚洲成人展, Asia Adult Expo.
Okay.
Then immediately following that exhibition is the 2025 Bitcoin Asia Conference. And as you probably know, Eric Trump headlined that conference. That showed Hong Kong's hustle and bustle has come back. These days, I'm sure it is impossible for Eric Trump to go to Shenzhen or Shanghai to headline a Bitcoin conference, a digital sort of currency conference. The second part about Hong Kong.
So you're saying, in case I'm going to explain it, extrapolate from what you just said, is Hong Kong will always be a little bit different. Will enjoy perhaps more freedom. It will be allowed to experiment various things. And that's very intentional, right, from Beijing?
It's not the intention. I mean, that is something that Hong Kong has been doing. Hong Kong is always that place where the culture from the East and the culture from the West blends very easily. That's one of the roles I hope Hong Kong will continue to play. And coming back to the politics, I was a journalist covering China for 30 years. And at the beginning, before 2019, Hong Kong was one of the freest, most freewheeling, has the most vibrant media sector in the entire world. You get newspapers on the left sponsored by the Chinese government like Wenhui Da Gong Bao, Hong Kong Commercial Daily. And then you have the mainstream media in the middle, like the South China Morning Post, Mingbao, Hong Kong Economic Journal, Xinbao, Hong Kong Economic Times, 香港经济日报. And then you get the TVB, the TV stations, ATV, cable TV in the middle. And then you have Apple Daily and Mad Dog Daily and Stand News on the right. It's very anti-Beijing, very anti-communist. And then you have the Falun Gong media on the further right, on the extreme right. They have their own political agenda. 2019 protests started, and then Beijing imposed the national security law, and this has chilling effects. That
all the outlets that you just mentioned from left to right, and what still exists?
And then the Apple Daily was shut down, the Stand News was shut down, and the two editors of Stand News was on trial and jailed for. And then many of those online blogs, podcasts, and media organizations moved to US or Australia or Canada. I think right now the scope in which the Hong Kong media can operate has become narrower. The Hong Kong officials have made it very clear, even with the national security law, the national security law only targeted a very small number of people who do things which will harm national security. And then these Hong Kong leaders often say the fact-based reporting, normal reporting, will be allowed to continue. That's where I have been given interviews in Hong Kong, and I sort of discussed this with my students. That's where whether we are journalists or journalism students, we should hold the Hong Kong officials to their pledge that fact-based, normal reporting will be allowed to continue. Why? Because I think the officials in Hong Kong and Beijing, they also know that the free flow of information is crucial for Hong Kong to remain as Asia's leading financial center.
The economic and financial news.
Then again, these days, the politics and the economics are closely entwined, right? It's difficult to say, stay away from politics, just focus on the economics. There were three things which have made Hong Kong a great success. One is the free flow of goods and people. Second is the free flow of capital. And the third, which is equally crucial, is the free flow of information.
Status.
But,
so do you think these three still free?
In terms of free flow of people, goods, and capital, they are still free. And I believe the free flow of information is largely free, but it's also getting increasingly difficult to make sense of China's politics because of the political developments in China. But one thing I can tell you, the political developments on the mainland, where the party leadership stresses on loyalty, discipline, secrecy, and all that. Now it is very difficult for journalists or researcher or someone like you to talk to someone on the Chinese mainland. It is still the case and will be the case in the future, is that it's still okay for people to talk about those things in Hong Kong, like me talking to you, but not as free as before 2019. So I think the problem we're having right now is that the people here, whether they are journalists or just ordinary people or politicians, they have started to exercise self-censorship. They believe, we shouldn't say that, we sort of shouldn't say the things that they probably had few inhibitions to say before 2019. Back in 1980s, China's late paramount Deng Xiaoping at that time twice publicly in meetings with people from Hong Kong and Taiwan. He said that after 1997, the people of Hong Kong will be allowed to criticize the Chinese Communist Party. Deng Xiaoping used a colloquial word in Mandarin. He said, "Ma." It has been the case from 1997 up to 2019. Now, after 2019, I'm probably the one who raised this question publicly. Can we still criticize the Communist Party? Why not? The respectable media organizations in Hong Kong, like Mingbao, EMP, and Hong Kong Economic Journal, they have carried different views and perspectives. And I know for a fact that the previous generation of leaders in China, like Zhu Rongji, when he was the prime minister, he read the daily summary of Hong Kong media reports every day. He wanted to understand how the outside world said about China and China's economic policies.
And I think it's important. Yeah, it's important for any political leader, if you truly want to know the real picture of your own country and how people really think. That's the role that media traditionally has played. It helps you govern better.
I think it is also important for Hong Kong to maintain this role, even at a time where, because of China's own political developments and because of China's evolving relationship with the United States and the Western world, as the tensions are rising. But then again, Hong Kong has its own issues. Hong Kong has not yet find that balance of having national security and economic development. And Hong Kong still has not yet find a balance between its need to integrate further into the Chinese mainland and also maintaining its international status, which is the international metropolitan city that Hong Kong has been over the past 100 years. And then this is the part that I believe Hong Kong needs to much more influence Beijing's thinking over Hong Kong. Right now in China, not many people know how to run a capitalist city like Hong Kong. Right? If Hong Kong wants to move forward, going from strength to strength, as Hong Kong officials would like to say these days, from stability to prosperity, then Hong Kong needs to take a much more active role in letting Beijing see the benefits of Hong Kong being a different city. But unfortunately, the impression I get is that now the people of Hong Kong are waiting for Beijing to tell Hong Kong how to move forward.
What are the sort of tug of war, the boundaries, and how much negotiation power or leverage it really has? Perhaps the leaders at the top, don't quite yet know because so much has changed, but it permeates the entire society. For example, reporting, what are the boundaries? What can you say? What can you not say? Because everything is kind of moving. It's not very clear where the lines are. And so what you're suggesting is there's a lot Hong Kong can proactively shape your own destiny.
Hong Kong can do that by doing a much better job of swaying Beijing's thinking on how Hong Kong can move forward. Maybe I'm wrong, but the impression I get is certain people in Hong Kong now are waiting for Beijing to tell them how to move forward. Then not a lot of people in Beijing knows how to run a capitalist city. I don't believe by offering constructive suggestions on Hong Kong should move forward somehow are not politically correct. I'm not saying that Hong Kong should move forward, ignore the commands from Beijing, because the imposition of national security law and what happened over the past 5 years has completely changed the relationship between Hong Kong and Beijing. But I believe only the people in Hong Kong know how to move forward better and faster. They cannot really wait for mandarins in Beijing to tell Hong Kong.
Clearly, care a lot about Hong Kong, what Hong Kong means and what Hong Kong can still in terms of a positive role that it can play in the bigger picture of China's development. So why did you decide to teach, and what do you hope to educate the next generation of people in Hong Kong in particular when there's so many questions about journalism, independent journalism.
I was really lucky that by chance I came to Hong Kong and find my calling by working for SCMP. After working as a journalist for 30 years, I have had some unique knowledge of reporting and writing on China. Over the past 30 years, I broke a lot of stories about China's politics. So I believe that now is the time for me to I don't want to sound noble or anything. I want to repay by teaching the young journalists in Hong Kong and China how to report one of the biggest stories in the world is about China, a rising China and its impact on the rest of the world. I want to just pass on my knowledge, my skills to them. And the second reason that I'm doing this is, as I often joke to my students, every year China invests billions of yuan in what they call the overseas propaganda, the communication to the outside world, right? The media organizations in China have been told repeatedly to do a better job of telling China's story well. But unfortunately, and this is something that I've been saying publicly, that over the past 10 years, China's massive propaganda states have done a terrible job of explaining China to the outside world. I believe there has been many misinformation, disinformation, and misperception about China. And there are many reasons for that. The one point I've been making consistently is this, that if China knows how to just a little bit better of telling its story well, China could spare itself lots of grievance. China may not win support, but China at least will win understanding and sympathy from the outside world. But now, because China still have no idea how to tell its story to the outside world, so I've been saying to my students, I want to pass on my knowledge to you, that hopefully one day when you grow up, become a journalist, you can do a much better job than me explaining China's rise to the outside world.
This is the reason we also want to have this conversation, because for a journalist like yourself, you understand any real picture is never as simple. And unfortunately, people simplify what's happening to Hong Kong these days. And so how do you tell a story? And maybe we should change the language, because telling a story sounds more propaganda driven, painting a more real picture and more balance, right? And let's not use the word real, because it's all real. A lot of stories are fact-based, but they're out of proportion or they don't reflect the bigger picture. So how do you really understand a place, a story, think it's fair, right? I think being fair is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see anything wrong with telling China's story well. I know that Americans, they all love to hear a good story. A good story could sort of send up the stocks. Everybody loves a good story. Sort of another reason that I'm doing this is because I'm always cautiously optimistic that about China, about Hong Kong. I believe that eventually things will get better. People in my generation, we are all eternally grateful to Deng Xiaoping. I believe that the one greatest achievement Deng Xiaoping did is that when he opened up China to the outside world, and he basically unleashed this desire of Chinese people to make a better life for themselves. This wave, this desire cannot be stopped and cannot be...
No, it's unstoppable. It shows. And you're seeing the impact now. On that note, thank you. I really appreciate your sharing, not just your life experience, but also your own option of the relationship between Hong Kong and Beijing. Yeah. Hong Kong has undeniably changed, but is it better, worse, or becoming another Chinese city? There's no straightforward answer. As Wang Xiangwei observes, the city has yet to strike a balance between safeguarding national security and fostering economic growth, or between deeper integration with the mainland and preserving the cosmopolitan, internationally oriented character it has cultivated over the past century. If Hong Kong is to progress, From stability to prosperity, as officials frequently say, it must play an active role in demonstrating to Beijing the value of remaining distinct, showing how that uniqueness can serve China's broader interests. This is Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we analyze the policies and political strategies of Trump 2.0 and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Thank you for watching and listening. We value your feedback. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast. See you next time.